Members of the media, colleagues, and friends, welcome to the 6th Annual Halifax International Security Forum, Canada's most important foreign policy tool. In a moment, you will be joined by your host for this weekend, the Minister of National Defence, the Honourable Rob Nicholson, and the Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada and Regional Minister for Nova Scotia, the Honourable Peter MacKay. It has been a difficult year in international security and an even more difficult year for the pursuit of peace. The people meeting here this weekend are meeting in the shadow of that very turbulent year and a terrorist attack here at home. I want to take a moment to talk with you about the unique quality of conversation that has made the forum such an important part of the international security calendar. The conversations that we hold here at the Halifax International Security Forum are important, relevant, and meaningful. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the start of World War I, and this month marks the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. The struggle for modernity, the fundamental struggle of the 20th century, is not yet won, so it continues. Indeed, if one were to believe what's been widely written and said, it might seem that the powers and forces that appear most hostile to our ideal of democratic modernity are in the ascendancy. In their different ways, a rising China, a resurgent Russia, and Islamist extremism in all of its manifestations are antithetical to the free and secure world that we, in this room and beyond, are striving for. In China, despite predictions that the economy is slowing down, its meteoric rise over the past 2+ decades has given people around the world a reason to believe that its model is and will continue to be a successful one. Russia, having seemed to be down and out not so long ago, manufactured a heist of its neighbor's territory and, lo and behold, gave its citizens a reason to believe that it is again a major player on the world stage. The Islamic State, Islamist extremism's newest success story as a fighting force in Syria and Iraq, despite its appalling tactics, has given a growing number of Sunni Muslims a reason to believe that they can grab the upper hand. Its successes to date inspired the October murder of 2 Canadian soldiers and an attack on Canada's National Parliament and War Memorial. Perhaps China, Russia, and the Islamic State have successfully created a reason to believe because they've come up from such lows. They have created the impression that it is they who have the momentum. And yet, over time, China, Russia, and the Islamic State are going to run up against their biggest obstacle, the challenge of modernity. Modernity. That word, modernity, is a highly contested one, but to those who believe that modernity and justice go hand in hand, we should be clear about what we mean by it. A modern society has 4 key components. 1, freedom of faith. 2, gender equality. 3, economic equity. And 4, democracy. Whether the leaders of China, Russia, and the Islamic State want to admit it or not, they know full well that their regimes are on borrowed time because, at the end of the day, whenever that day is, their peoples are going to demand these requirements in full. To delay the inevitable and allow more time on their authoritarian clock, China and Russia have decided to pursue dangerous revisionist policies that feed off national pride and deeply held resentments about the Western world. In the first stages of Islamic State rule, it is generating terror to establish and extend its position in much the same way that Lenin and Stalin in the Soviet Union and Mao in China did, with a view to consolidating power once the population was too terrified to resist. The picture can seem bleak, but we are not helpless. There are three things that modern forces on the outside can do to help safely bring about the inevitable empowerment of modernist forces on the inside in those very countries that most concern us. First, start succeeding. Nothing succeeds like success, and as the modern economies recover and generate wealth, they will again expand the greatest power that they have, the magnetic power to attract. Signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, leaving out China, and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, leaving out Russia, will go a long way toward that end. Second, stop pretending. While tactical cooperation between virtually all nations is necessary at some time or another, strategic cooperation is a different matter altogether and can only be successful between nations who have a shared understanding of an end goal. And both China and Russia, because of the very nature of their current leadership and how it is chosen, will never share a modern society's understanding on any major strategic issue. For that reason, the G20 will remain limited in what it can accomplish, and the idea of a USA-China G2 will never become anything but an interesting idea. Without insulting any members of the G20, the modern economies and emerging democracies among that group might consider announcing enhanced cooperation on strategic issues without falling back on the all-too-comfortable G7. Third, and finally, we must meet. An alliance for democratic modernity that includes not only governments, but also influential individuals selected from modern democracies and modernists from academia, business, civil society, and journalism, selected from countries working toward a modern future, should meet regularly to exchange ideas and experiences. Over time, it will become a group dedicated to maintaining the modern world and giving those currently left behind a true reason to believe. This forum, the Halifax International Security Forum, is an alliance for modernity. This forum brings together people on the front lines facing consequential local threats, writers who challenge and influence the world's thinking on security, and decision makers who make the tough choices. This forum leads the conversation about modernity. I challenge our participants to challenge the status quo and ultimately improve our prospects for peace. That completes my remarks. Now to hand over the floor to the two people you really want to hear from. Your host, the Honorable Rob Nicholson, Minister of National Defence, and the Honorable Peter MacKay, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada and Regional Minister of Nova Scotia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Van Prague. That will begin in 1 minute.
Well, Minister MacKay, Mr. Van Prague, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's great to be here once again in Halifax, the home of Canada's Atlantic Fleet. This historic city, as you know, has played a fundamental role in the development of Canada. Not only has it been a port of entry and commerce for immigrants, visitors, and goods, but it has been and remains a gateway to the world for Canadians. For those who, like me, who have come here from other parts of Canada and all over the world, I welcome. Our government is proud to support events like the Halifax International Security Forum. It provides the opportunity to renew Canada's commitment to global security and to discuss ways to broaden our engagement with our allies and partners around the world. Looking back at some of the topics addressed here in past years, it's apparent just how perceptive the discussions have been on topics such as the future of terrorism, the unstable and difficult path towards democracy in the Middle East, and the growing need for democratic nations to act decisively in response to conflicts. The frank dialogue at previous iterations of the forum have been particularly relevant when we consider the international events of the past year. Indeed, it's an understatement to say that this has been a significant year for security issues, with the ongoing situations in Ukraine and, of course, in Iraq. These crises challenge international stability and have far-reaching consequences. Amidst the ongoing instability in the Middle East, Canada is participating in the Middle East Stabilization Force, the international coalition assisting security forces in the Republic of Iraq fighting against the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL. Canada has contributed 6 CF-18s, 2 Auroras, and 1 Polaris air refueler to aid in the airstrikes aimed at destroying ISIL's infrastructure and equipment, helping to deny the terrorists the military means to attack Iraqi security forces or coalition assets. Just yesterday, we provided an update on Canadian Armed Forces operations and confirmed that Canada has conducted 2 additional airstrikes, one targeting the ISIL warehouse facility used to shelter explosive device manufacturing activities, and the other targeting ISIL fighting positions. I know our men and women in uniform will continue to demonstrate operational excellence as Canada stands with our coalition partners against the atrocities of ISIL. Canada is also engaged in Eastern and Central Europe, promoting security and stability as part of NATO reassurance measures in response to the Putin regime's military aggression in the region. Canadian Armed Forces are contributing to operational planning at Supreme Allied Headquarters in Europe. Our soldiers have routinely taken part in NATO training exercises to strengthen our interoperability with our NATO allies. HMCS Toronto is currently operating under Standing NATO Maritime Group 2 in the Mediterranean Sea, and the Air Task Force is deployed to Lithuania, helping safeguard NATO European airspace under the Baltic Air Policing Mission, in addition to providing financial, humanitarian, and non-lethal military support. We are committed both to supporting the Ukrainian people who continue to fight for their country's sovereignty and standing with our allies. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2014 Halifax International Security Forum promises to be an engaging dialogue on these important topics. It's a chance for the world to come together in Halifax with leading thinkers, policymakers, and practitioners from nations around the world to discuss ideas and share insights on important global security challenges. I look forward to participating in these conversations, which I know will help inform policy decisions in the upcoming year. And so I join with Peter MacKay and Peter Van Praag as president of the forum in welcoming you to Halifax and an engaging few days of discussion on the rapidly evolving geostrategic context of our world today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Minister Nicholson and Peter Van Praag, and to all of you, bienvenue au Halifax.
Welcome. Je suis vraiment ravi et fier de voir ouvrir ce forum ici encore une fois à notre ville capitale et dans notre province où on ne connaît que trop bien l'importance de la sécurité et l'impact de la sécurité sur notre pays et sur la communauté internationale. Donc, comme le ministre Nicholson, bienvenue à tous, bienvenue aux médias à Halifax.
Puis, une fois en cours, un forum international sur la sécurité.
To welcome you to the international forum here in Halifax.
Minister Nicholson, for his commitment to this forum as Minister of National Defence, as a leader within our government, as somebody who believes very strongly in Canada's contribution to the world through defence and security, and the deep traditions that this region has offered to the defence of Canada and the world. And he himself has deep roots here in Atlantic Canada, and Cape Breton in particular, for which I know he's very proud. Peter Van Praag, my friend, someone who I've worked with over the years and is very proud of Canada's contribution as well. And so this prestigious gathering highlights and underscores the significant and uniquely Canadian contribution that is made to international security. And I'm always impressed with the caliber of the delegates that this forum attracts from around the world. This year, the forum, as many know, will host more than 300 participants from a record 61 countries. Hundreds of the world's leading thinkers on global security will be in one room, our room, here in Halifax. And speaking of rooms, I'm told, incidentally, that there will be over 1,600 hotel rooms over the course of this weekend that will be filled. So it has an impact directly on the economy of this city as well. It is, though, the informal nature of the forum which allows attendees to exchange ideas frankly and openly as we search for constructive, thoughtful solutions to very complex problems. Minister Nicholson has touched on many of those problems to which we are all engaged. I believe that the discussions, the meaningful discussions that are held here over the next 3 days will make a difference. This is, in fact, where change begins. It is the dialogue, it is the relationships, it's where ideas are formed and solidified and solutions are found. Through this forum, Canada continues to make a significant contribution to bringing about and uniting serious and leading thinkers to tackle very urgent global challenges. Challenges that we know have become more painfully obvious in recent weeks. Crimea, the fight against ISIL, Ebola, and other plagues that challenge the world and health security. As regional minister, I am certainly proud as well of the beautiful setting and the warm, welcoming greeting that our guests receive here each and every year that contribute to the continued success of this forum. The balmy weather that we enjoy here in Halifax is also part of that warm welcome. It's always like this this time of the year. And my condolences to our friends in Buffalo. We lived through White Juan, and we know what you're going through. I also want to acknowledge and thank the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Restaurant and Food Association, all of the shopkeepers and store owners in Halifax, and the people of Halifax who have been so welcoming. Our universities and community colleges in this region, in this province, schools like Acadia, St. Mary's, St. FX, and others are also part of this discussion. And the Port of Halifax itself, perhaps one of Canada's greatest natural geographic assets, this deep, ice-free port of commerce and portal to the world, the setting for this forum, have all been profiled, and the economic benefits of the International Security Forum that are brought to this city are on full display. A worthy investment, as it was recently deemed by the Halifax Chronicle-Herald. And I would also just close by saying I take particular pleasure in seeing how Halifax, among other great cities and locations in Canada, is recognized around the world. As I mentioned, Halifax is known not only as home to the East Coast Navy, as the Minister has said, and as one of the world's great ports, it is also now hosting a forum that approaches defense and security challenges in a fresh and engaging way. Je me réjouis à l'avance de cette.
I am delighted at the thought of this thoughtful and constructive weekend in Halifax. Thank you all.
Informative and constructive weekend here in Halifax. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ministers. We will now open the floor for questions. Please limit yourself to one question and identify your organization. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Steve Whittico, National Reporter of CBC. Mr. Nicholson, I'm curious, the stories out today regarding inactive Canadian soldiers who are going over to fight with the Peshmerga in Iraq. They based their decision on, according to the reports, they're motivated by the beheading, saying also that the West, including Canada, is not making a strong enough response, and that's why they're going over. What do you have to say to that, and is the government doing anything to help or hinder their efforts?
Well, Canada is making a considerable effort. As I indicated in my opening remarks, we have been committed. We made a 6-month commitment to the strike against ISIL, and I've pointed out that we have CF-18s, Auroras, Polaris there. We have hundreds of people on the ground in Kuwait, and we're very much part of the coalition strikes against ISIL, and quite frankly, I'm very proud of our men and women in uniform who always respond to every challenge. Canada is not a country that stands on the sidelines, and we thank our armed forces for always stepping up to the plate, and so I'm very proud of the work that they've done.
But what about the question was about the inactive soldiers that are going over to volunteer to fight with?
Again, our Canadian forces have always stepped up to the plate, and they meet the challenges that are presented to them, and nobody has a better record than we do in that regard.
Thank you. Evan?
Hi, Evan Sullivan, CBC News. Hi, Minister. Two quick questions. Any idea when we'll get the cost thus far of the mission? Any idea when we'll get the cost thus far for the mission? And can you give us any indication, given what's going on in Kuwait, has there been any discussion after the 6-month deadline of Canada extending that deadline and maybe a bombing into Syria?
Again, we'll take it one step at a time in terms of the mission time. We've indicated that it's a 6-month mission, and we were clear on that. But again, the door is not closed on these issues. And that being said, with respect to the costs, yes, there will be costs, but and in the process that we have in Parliament, we will present those costs. But I always emphasize the fact that there's a human cost to what is taking place in that part of the world. The atrocities committed by ISIL are completely unacceptable. And so the Canadian Armed Forces have stepped up to the plate, and we will be there. I mean, this is we've only been in the mission here about a little over a month now, and we've indicated 6 months. But again, the Canadian Armed Forces are there, and they're prepared to do it. And is there a cost? Yes, there's a cost, but there's a human cost if we don't participate in something like this. And this is what we are doing at the present time.
Justin?
Justin Langford. Ministers, thank you. So far on Mission Impact, we've hit a warehouse, we've hit some construction equipment, we've hit training camp. Can you kind of walk us through what the actual decision-making process is there? I realize there's a NATO command process that picks these targets. Is there an overarching, ideology or idea as to how you're choosing these targets? And will it change as ISIS changes tactics as well?
I mean, it's not an ideology. I mean, in terms of where and how these positions are chosen. I mean, we work very closely with our allies. The Americans, as you know, have a huge role to play in this, and all our efforts are coordinated with our American and our allies. And the strikes are out of Kuwait at the present time. And that being said, they analyze the intelligence that they are giving, and they want to be as effective and as careful as possible, quite frankly. And I think that's an important component of this as well.
Kristen?
Saw that coming. As you said, there have been, my name's Christy Smith, I politics. As you said, there have been updates as to the mission in a combat sense. Can you update how Canada is doing on a humanitarian front, which I understand is also a priority?
Yes, it is. As with all these missions, Canada has a long record of associating not just our military action, but the humanitarian component as well. And we have been very helpful in getting supplies. We work with other countries, and this has been an ongoing mission. It's not just the focus most recently, of course, is on the military mission, but we've had a long-standing history of getting support to individuals because as you point out, that's an important component of it as well. And I should mention now that I've got the opportunity, our Special Operation Forces who have been assisting and training and supporting and giving advice. And so ours has been a comprehensive approach, and certainly that will continue.
Thank you.
Minister Nicholson?
Yes.
Hi, Mike McDonald from the Canadian Press. Has any consideration been given by Canada to send more troops to Iraq to help with the training there, as the United States has indicated?
Again, our mission is very focused. As I indicated in the last question, we've had Special Operation Forces there to give advice, to help with the training. But that being said, our mission that's outlined here recently with our 6-month mission is to support the airstrikes in Iraq, and that's exactly what we're doing. And I won't speculate on any other possible decision. This is the decision that we have made. And again, I'm very proud of the men and women in uniform who, again, always step up to the plate and do us proud.
Chris?
Thank you very much. Chris Sims of Sun News Network. Either minister can handle this one. Despite the recent terrorist attacks here in Canada, I actually got a comment from a journalist on the radio last week saying nobody's going to attack Nova Scotia. Nobody's going to attack Halifax. It couldn't happen here. Number one, do you find that attitude is changing now because of those attacks? And number two, for this forum particularly, you got a lot of important people in one small area. Have you guys stepped up security for this site because of that?
Thanks, Chris. Look, I think the events of a few weeks ago in Ottawa and Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu were, frankly, a bit of a wake-up call for the fact that Canada is certainly not immune from terrorist attacks. Not far from here, what we saw happen in Moncton, for different reasons and different ideology, we've also seen security forces, RCMP, attacked. So given that reality, there is very much a heightened awareness, both amongst our security forces, but also among our citizens. This city in particular, which is accustomed to the presence of our military, perhaps more than some cities, would be aware of this heightened focus and concentration on protection, on ensuring that we are perhaps in a heightened state of readiness, I would describe it. And that's in keeping with our experience, the recent experience, but the overall experience that we have to be prepared, which is why as a government we've made it a priority to invest in our military. It's why we have a long-term strategy and vision for our Canadian forces, and Minister Nicholson has continued to emphasize that. And for that very reason, I believe that the discussion that is happening here lends itself to greater cooperation, collaboration with our allies, with like-minded countries. And the short answer to, do we have increased security posture here? Absolutely, of course.
We have time for one more question.
My name is Rick Grant. I'm with CTV. How is this conference going to directly impact any decisions in dealing with ISIS or in dealing with Russia? I mean, nobody's here from Russia, and the decisions with respect to ISIS and how to fight them are made elsewhere. So how does this conference directly impact Russia, the Ukraine, and ISIS?
Well, the whole question of terrorism, security issues is as part of what we will be discussing, just as we did in the past. And as I indicated in my opening remarks, that a number of the issues that have been discussed last year and in previous years were very helpful in the sense of what has been taking place just in the last year since we were in Halifax. So I'm looking forward to a full discussion, and you're certainly welcome to ask that question at the conclusion of this, but I'm looking forward to the discussion. I think it'll be very helpful to discuss security issues with so many other players around the world. I think can be very, very helpful, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much to Minister Nicholson's point.
Could I just add very briefly to Rick Grant's question? I think it's important to point out that the people who are here, the personnel who have joined us at this forum, include top-ranking U.S. military and other representatives of allied nations. So the discussions that are happening not only in the formal part of the agenda, but also discussions that occur in bilaterals, very important. And let's not lose sight of the fact that this sends a message that there is consensus among countries about subject matters such as Crimea and Russian aggression. And the Russians are listening. And they heard a very clear message from Canada and from Canada's Prime Minister to get out of Ukraine. And so this is continuing and sending a consistent message from democratic countries that type of aggression won't be tolerated. And there are consequences, including sanctions.
Thank you very much.